everyone, I'm Rebecca Giannini. If you don't know by now, this is my group. I'm a parenting and relationship coach, and I go live every week on topics with regard to everything. I'm going to start that over. Okay. Because nobody's on live yet. And I can do a trim video. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. If this is your first live, I'm so glad to have you here in the group. My name is Rebecca Giannini. This is my group, and I'm a parenting and relationship coach. I help families navigate relationships and learn coping mechanisms and learn how to communicate in a way that is healthy. I help families break generational patterns and create, sometimes for the first time in that family line, a healthy relationship or a healthy parent-child dynamic. I also help families who are navigating divorce do that in a healthy way. Basically anything to do with relationships and communication. So tonight's live is going to be about the internal framework. And I already did one live about this, and if you're interested in that, please let us know in the comments, and we will make sure that you get tagged in that first video. This is sort of a follow-up video and assumes that you understand some of the basics about the internal framework. I will give a little bit of an overview for those of you that you missed it, so that you're able to see that here. Basically, the internal framework is how our brain makes sense of our experiences. And so we have all of these experiences that our brain is basically filtering and processing and trying to make sense of. And so it helps us understand what to do if a similar situation comes up again. So it's basically your brain's way of creating shortcuts so that you know how to manage threats, know how to figure out if a situation is safe, know what to expect and how to respond in a given situation. And so this is really helpful in some ways, and it can really get in our way in other ways. So for example, if we didn't have this feature, and in human history, and we didn't have a way to formulate memories, and if we didn't have a way to compartmentalize situations that happen to us, we would happen upon, a predator and not know that wasn't a big warm fuzzy friend. We would continually be in situations that were dangerous, and we wouldn't survive very long. So basically, it's the brain's way of helping us know what to expect in a given situation. And so because our brain can help us recognize patterns in situations so that we know what to expect, it basically helps us make guesses about what to expect in similar situations. Where this comes into relationships is that we might have a situation where a parent or a caregiver doesn't make us feel safe expressing our feelings. And so our brain sort of recognizes that pattern early on, and maybe we start avoiding sharing our feelings or asking for our needs to be met, or getting really aggressive to make sure our needs get met. So basically, our brain is recognizing the patterns in our parent-child relationship as children and in our sibling relationships, and it basically gives us a blueprint for how to move through situations in our adult relationships. So some of those patterns that you developed in childhood, or those thinking patterns around relationships, aren't necessarily serving you well. And so the internal framework work is all about recognizing what those patterns are in your relationships to others, what those things are that you act out on, and so that you can have thinking patterns around yourself, your behavior, and others that actually serve you and help you have healthy relationships. So you can probably think of either your own relationship with a parent or a friend's relationship to a parent, and recognize that they might have, like if you were struggling with something deeply, you might not go to your parents to share or to get help for that. You might talk to them about it once it's been fixed or solved, but you might not go to them in that deep emotional space that you'd like to. You probably are in this group because you want to change some of those patterns, and you want your kids or you want your partner to be able to trust you and have access to you in those situations where they're struggling. And if we continue those same patterns in ourselves and in our relationships, we're going to get the same effects. So if you grew up in a situation where you couldn't trust your parents to, or your caregivers to comfort you when you were upset, or you couldn't trust your parents with your struggles because they shamed you, or you couldn't trust them to take you seriously or get your needs met, or whatever it happened to be, it's sort of ingrained in you to expect that and to live that out. So it's a huge shift to change that. Not that it can't be done, and it's absolutely possible for it to be done. I help people do it all the time, but it takes quite a bit of effort because we're basically going against years of programming that wants to sort of help you stay stuck. Now this gets a lot easier when we're aware of the internal framework. So like I said, those patterns of helping us understand what to expect, we sort of start to make assumptions and make statements of truth about situations. So we might say internally something like, I'm not sharing my feelings again, or we might have had words spoken to us that said, be strong, don't cry, or you're acting like a baby, or something like that, shame statements. And somewhere inside we learned, don't share feelings. Sharing feelings is weak. Don't share feelings. That's a vulnerable thing. Don't be vulnerable. That feels unsafe. And we're not necessarily aware of those statements, but they come up in our relationships with our partners, with our children. And so these ideas are still sort of deciding our behavior even when we're not aware that those ideas are present. Now some people have more awareness than others and can recognize, wow, I have a problem with vulnerability, or I don't let myself be needed, or I don't allow myself to need others, or I shut down in conversations. All of these are sort of like framework statements that give us hints as to what might have happened before. And sometimes it's important to go back and try and figure out where the statements came from, but whether or not you have something to point to is not really what's important. What's important is you start recognizing the patterns that you have around relationships, and you start recognizing those beliefs you have around relationships. So you might have the belief that it's normal for a partner to be disrespectful, or it's normal for a partner to not help around the house, or it's normal for a dad to do such and such with their kids, or it's not normal for a mom to do such and such, or we have all sorts of patterns. We have these thinking patterns around ourselves, like a statement that someone might have around themselves is, I'm lazy, or I'm too sensitive, or I'm a big baby, I cry about everything, or we have sort of all sorts of statements, and they really get in the way of us having the lives we want. So when you're describing yourself, think of how you might describe yourself. My goodness, tonight I feel like my brain is like mush, so it is hard for me to find words tonight. So I actually think that I might be moving these lives to earlier in the day, because Monday is kind of a heavy work day for me. So I might need to move them earlier in the day so that I have a fresh mind here when I'm sharing. So anyway, we want to start focusing on what are our character statements about ourselves and what are character statements about others. And we all have these statements about ourselves, whether or not you recognize them. The first step is beginning to recognize what those statements are, and start keeping an inventory of those statements. When you know what those statements are, then we can sort of get a little bit of distance and start shifting those statements. So let's say, for example, I have an idea that I can't get anywhere on time, or that let's use that statement. This is one that I've struggled with personally. And this was really difficult to struggle with in our culture, because our culture is so time focused. And so it was really hard for me growing up to get anywhere on time. And so what happens is all of these experiences of being late helped my brain create a pattern of, I can't get anywhere on time, I can't manage my time. And so I had all these I am statements, all of these character statements about what I was capable of, because I had all of this evidence telling me that that was true. And so when we gather all this evidence, then we make this leap of, this is who I am, or this is what I'm capable of. We attach that statement to self, or we attach that statement to others if we're gathering evidence for them. Attach that statement to self, and once we do that, the evidence becomes filtered through that statement. And so after we start attaching that statement to self, then that's the filter through which we experience the world. And so it becomes more and more solidified, that statement that we've attached to ourselves. And so every time I'm late after that, it's, see, look, I can't get anywhere on time. See, look, oh, I'm just the worst with time management. See, look, I can never figure out how to get somewhere on time. Even if I woke up a certain number of hours early, even if I planned everything, my brain was helping me achieve that goal, because I was saying, this is what's possible for me, therefore this is going to be what I see. So the internal framework is so powerful here, because it basically takes all of these things that are painful about ourselves, these things that we don't like, and it shifts these statements from forever permanent statements about what we're capable of to skill statements, to what skill do I need to learn in order to get out of that behavior. And when it's about a skill that I need to learn rather than something that's already decided, the whole world opens up. So we make this leap by going through a more accurate description of the behavior that we're currently seeing. So an I am statement is going to be the character statement, the permanent statement about our character or what we're capable of. So I call that, I have a couple of different names for that, because we have frameworks around, what the world is, we have frameworks around who other people are, and we have frameworks around ourselves. So when it's a framework around ourselves, I call it a character statement. When it's a framework around others or somebody else about something, that who they are permanently, then I would call that a character statement about them. But if it's a statement about, a profession or a people group or, a process in the world or whatever, then I would just call that a framework statement. So we're listening for framework statements. And when we recognize that there's a framework statement, we want to look at a statement that actually causes us pain, so causes us distress in some way. And that distress is a signal from our body that we don't want that to be true. If a statement doesn't cause you pain, right, you're not going to have a lot of motivation to change it. And there are certainly statements that are more harmful than others, and we can sort of prioritize which statement do I want to work on at one time. But a statement that causes you a significant amount of distress is usually a good one to focus on, because then you start recognizing, oh, I can make these shifts, I can change, and then the world sort of opens up in the area of skill. So we take this statement of, I can't get anywhere on time, I'm always late. And so in my family growing up, this was the norm too. We had a major problem with time management. And so all of this evidence that I had gathered, and I saw people, in my life struggling to get places on time. And I could see that other people were not struggling with this, but for some reason my family was. And so somewhere in my my brain was like, this is who we are. This is how we get places. We're always late. We are always late was the message. And and that was often true. And so the way that we get out of that is trading in that character statement for a pair of a behavior and a skill statement. So the first thing we want to do is find a behavior statement that is more true than the character statement, because we're not trying to trick our brain here. We're not trying to This isn't like positive affirmations. This isn't wishful thinking. Our brain is too smart for that, really. And so if I have all of this evidence that I have amassed that shows me that it's really hard for me to get places on time, in fact, it feels almost impossible, if I just all of a sudden say, I'm great at time management, and I'm trying to like will myself into that, my brain isn't gonna allow that. It's too smart for that. So we want to find a truer statement, a truer behavior statement, so our brain can let go of that being the truth. That problematic character statement being the truth. So we want to start looking at the evidence through a more objective filter. So I might say, okay, even though I have all this evidence, of this time I can remember being late, this time that it was incredibly important for me to be on time, and I tried all of these strategies and I still couldn't do it. This time where I was so embarrassed about being late, this time, and I look at all of those statements, which are a fact, those happened, and I start looking at them through just a little bit of a different filter. And I might say, okay, is there something else that could be true than I just can't be on time? Is there something else that could be true than I'm always late? Is there a different reason for why that might be true? And the answers we get there are really important. It could be that being on time wasn't modeled well for me, or time management wasn't modeled well for me, or learning how to estimate how long certain activities take, or learning how to stay on task so that I can figure out all the things I need in order to get there on time. Maybe it's the project management and planning that needs to work. So if I can find even one reason why that character statement is no longer true, that's all I need. And so we look for that behavior that was lacking, basically. So let's go with time management, and you might need multiple skills in order to get out of a character statement. So it might be a combination of those skills that I would need to work on in order to shift that character statement. So every time I hear that, every time I have evidence as I'm working on this skill, every time I hear, oh, dang it, I'm late again, I'm always late, instead of reinforcing that belief, I'm going to start using that different framework, that different pattern of thinking about it. Okay, I was late again. I'm still learning time management. I'm still learning how to get places on time. I'm still learning how to estimate how long it takes to get from this side of town to that side of town. In my brain, it seems like it takes 15 minutes, but consistently it takes 25. I'm still learning how to guess the right amount of time that I might need for an activity. And so my brain starts making sense of those experiences differently. And when it starts making sense of those experiences differently, I begin to create a different framework. And instead of I'm always late because that's who I am and I can't change that, it's I was late today because I didn't plan ahead, because I didn't write a list of things I needed and didn't get them ready the night before. And we start to have these other explanations for that besides this is an unchangeable thing about me that I can't control. If our brain gets the message, this is an unchangeable thing about me that I can't control, it stops allocating resources to gathering skills. It basically, we give it the message, this is settled already. We don't need any input here. We don't need any resources here. So don't think about it. Every time I reinforce that, see, I'm always late. Oh, I'm always late. Oh, I'm always late. We get that message. And the brain then does exactly what we're asking it to do, which is to not allocate any resources. So if I trade in that statement, oh, time management wasn't modeled very well for me as a child. I'm still learning how to manage my time. So we trade in that character statement for a behavior and skill statement. Time management wasn't modeled very well for me. That's our behavior statement. Our skill statement might be I'm learning how to manage my time so that I can be places on time. And this is true for everything else too. Like let's say you're a parent trying to learn how to speak to your kids with respect even when you're upset. If you, if what was modeled for you was blowing up or giving the cold shoulder or whatever it happens to be, that's going to be your natural pattern. It's going to be what you naturally reach for. And if you have a lot of pain about that, a lot of shame about that, it's an indication that you are falling below what you actually want to be, how you want to be behaving. So instead of hearing that and saying, oh, I'm the worst, I always yell at my kids. Oh, I'm the worst mom, I always yell at my kids. Or, oh, I'm the worst partner, I can't get control of my anger. Oh. Instead of reinforcing that belief, we are going to speak about it differently. We're going to find a reason why that might be there. And when we label it, we're also trying to help our brain make sense of why it happens so frequently. So let's say when you're looking at that evidence for and against that character statement, you want to see if you can even find a single time where that character statement wasn't true. So you might look and say, okay, can I think of a single time where I was on time? And if I can think of, well, actually, yeah. Remember that time in college where I was consistently getting to class on time? What was different about that? And we start asking the brain to look for different evidence than, see, I'm always late. See, I'm always late. We ask the brain to look for evidence where I was actually successful there. Now, most of you are actually going to be able to find some evidence to the contrary, but sometimes you can't find any evidence to the contrary. So when we're searching for evidence to the contrary, we're basically giving the brain the idea that that isn't fully true. And if that isn't fully true, then I can let it go. So we're going to look for statements like, sometimes I am late, or a lot of the times I'm late. I'm still learning how to be on time. Or a lot of times I lose it with my kids. I'm still learning to speak to them with respect even when I'm upset. If we can't remember a single time where we actually succeeded, we might look for this behavior statement. We might say this behavior statement. Up till now, I have always been late. Up till now, I've lost it with my kids even though I didn't want to. Up till now, I've done X. So we might use sometimes, we might use a lot of the time, maybe even most of the time. The only statement we're not using is always, because always gives our brain the message that there's no work needed here. So back to the yelling character statement. So we have, I always yell at my kids, or I always lose it when I'm upset. I'm a horrible mom, or I'm a horrible partner. Our behavior statement might be, a lot of the times I lose it with my kids. Up till now, I've lost it with my kids, about bath time. Up till now, I've lost it with my kids about such and such. I'm still learning to have bath time happen without a blow up. I'm still learning how to navigate bedtime without getting upset. And my brain is tired, so it's having a hard time finding the right words. But we don't want to use the word without, because, or the absence of a skill. So we wouldn't say something like, I'm learning not to yell at my kids, because the absence of the behavior isn't very helpful for the brain. It's abstract. So we might say something, instead of saying, I'm learning not to yell, which is the absence of something, I'm learning to speak to my kids with respect, even when I'm upset. So we're doing the presence of a skill rather than the absence of the problematic behavior. Thanks, Heather. I think I probably need to cut this off unless anybody has questions, because my brain is just so tired tonight. I'm going to give you a moment to see if there are any questions in the comments, and then I actually might just delete this live and go again next week, but maybe I'll leave it up. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I definitely think I need to probably change the time of the live so that I'm not doing this so late. So that will be helpful. I might put up a poll in the group for times that are more helpful than others, but otherwise I might actually do it Monday mornings instead. Then I'll be like fresh. Yeah, I don't see any questions in the comments, so what I'm thinking is I'll probably redo this live when I'm feeling not so fuzzy. But I'll leave it up until I have a chance to do another one on the same topic. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me and popping in. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.